Welcome to the Phenomenal Woman interview series, a series powered by Florian London to champion, highlight and celebrate women doing phenomenal things in their chosen fields. Today, I'm super excited to have the brilliant, beautiful Sonia with us. Sonia, can you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, thank you for having me. Firstly, I love Florian London bags. I have the copper metallic one and it has absolutely changed my life. So I just want to make that really clear. It is brilliant. My name is Sonya Barlow. I am an award-winning entrepreneur. I run the LMF Network, which is a careers platform and inclusion consultancy. Our mission is to bridge the careers gap and to build the careers and confidence of 25,000 people by 2025. Outside of that, I'm a BBC radio presenter, a best-selling author, a content creator, and generally a public speaker. So I'm super excited to be here. And just the fact that you've recognized me as a phenomenal woman just means that I must be doing something right.
Indeed, of course, Sonia. So my next question is, what motivated you to do what you do?
I think it's a really good question. So what motivated me to do what I do? Honestly, I think I've been doing it my whole life, but I didn't know that you can make a business or a brand at the back of it.
Of course.
So since I've been young, I actually came to the UK when I was 4 and grew up in a council estate, working class background, and then my parents moved around when I was a teenager. You know, I stayed at the same school. I definitely saw them work hard to level our lives up. But I also saw the insecurities and the unfairness that comes, or the inequalities that come with being in the system, especially as a woman of colour. And I'm really grateful that my family, first and foremost, always gave me a voice to say whatever it is that I wanted, as long as I could justify it. And I think that's really important. So I've always had the confidence, I just didn't know how to finesse it into something. So once I graduated from university, I worked in the world of tech, and I found myself not only isolated and feeling quite lonely, but most importantly being the only one. And I felt like a complete imposter. I was like, I don't deserve to be here, I don't deserve to be in this place, like how can I be around all these experienced, senior, amazing people? And I think around 2018, I kind of came out of my shell and I said, how can I feel like an imposter? Like, how can I let other people make me feel like that?
Yeah.
And so I started LMF Network as a brunch club. Unfortunately, in 2018 and 2019, I lost my job. So in 2020, I was like, I'm going to take a chance on myself. I have the skills. I have problem-solving skills. I'm super curious. I can build a community. I have the confidence. And most importantly, I know what people need to build their lives and their careers. So in 2020, I became my biggest cheerleader. I started social media. I didn't have it before. I started doing events and workshops and just talking about how we can build our own confidence and sense of self whilst being in the corporate ladder. And truly, I think it was around 2022 where it all started to actually come to light. I had a book deal, I had a BBC radio show, I had, you know, a social following. I woke up one day and everything had blue ticks on them, and I think people were more proud of me for getting a blue tick than anything else. And I think, you know, in summary, how did I get into what I was doing? I just realised that in order to change the system, you need to actually change the system, and you can't finger point to other people until you're looking at yourself and you're saying, what am I actually doing to help myself and those around me? And I guess I just wanted to be a change leader or a change maker of some kind.
Well, I love that. I love the background that you've given to us. And I think my next question is, what drives you to push for diversity and inclusion? I mean, you've touched on it, growing up in a council estate and not seeing people that look like you doing what you're doing right now. What made you want to push for diversity and inclusion?
Do you know, the interesting thing is, I didn't know like diversity and inclusion was a thing until people started saying it was a thing. I was like, I've always just been some kind of activist. I don't like people telling me no, firstly. Like, are you my mom or dad? Like, don't tell me no.
Tell me no.
Don't tell me no. For me, a no is a not right now. I think the second thing is, I've been in so many spaces where you're pushed to the side or you're seen as the other. And interestingly, when I was at university, I did a dissertation on the perceptions on non-conformity in the interview rounds in finance, which sounds like it's a lot, but basically what that meant is, if I am coming into an interview round with an eyebrow piercing or with a nose piercing or really bright tops, how can you judge me based on my identity and what I'm wearing and how I look? Why are you not actually judging me on the experience that I have? And I found that there were some anomalies. So I didn't know D&I was a thing in 2015 when I did my dissertation. I was just super passionate about something which I'd seen and experienced myself. And it wasn't until I got into the workspace where D&I roundtables, D&I women groups. And I was like, great, but what are you actually doing? They've got no budget, they've got no actual execution, but apparently they've got all these awards making them look good. And I think at some point, I was just tired of people not being real.
Yes.
And I was tired of the fakeness that comes with being an industry and expected to show up as their versions of their best selves, and yet they're saying you have to be authentic. And honestly, I am me and I've always been me. So to some extent, I absolutely pretended and conformed in the industry of tech, especially. And then one day I kind of woke up and I was like, this is my version of me, because you said I can be myself at work. They didn't like my version of me. They weren't ready for it, you know? I was ambitious, I was opinionated, I saw the gaps and I wanted to really fill them in the way that I could. And so I think I'm super passionate about diversity and inclusion, because for me it's not a fad, it's not a buzzword, it's not something that's on Google. It basically means that young women like me, young individuals like me who maybe don't even look and feel like me but can understand what I'm saying, they can be in spaces in which they didn't even dream about.
Of course.
On the media, they didn't even consider they had space for. They can use the skills that they thought once were not strengths to really lead and guide them. And I'm passionate about making sure that people live their best versions of their lives in their measure of success. And that's really important. My measure of success is not to chase money. I had money. I had a lot of money. More money, more problems. Honestly, it's really real. My measure of success is to have freedom. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. I like being able to do this on a Sunday. I like being able to cancel my calendar and do what I want. I want to be able to be in spaces where inclusion is actually an action point or an activity, not just something you tick a box and you say, now we're inclusive, but actually you go on their stakeholder charts and they still look and feel the same, because ultimately you're therefore not creating something for the mass consumer or customer, which is us.
Yeah,
sorry, I went off on a tangent.
I know.
Passionate about what I'm
I know.
saying.
I can just tell that you're so passionate about creating the network.
The LMF Network.
LMF Network. Apologies for that. A lot of women will listen to this, and like what you mentioned, you believed in yourself and you took a chance on yourself. But people tend to have what we call imposter syndrome. Like, am I good enough? Am I, pretending? How do I fit in? How would you advise somebody that has a lot of imposter syndrome to overcome it? Did you have any, and how did you overcome it?
Such a great question. I think I had a lot of imposter syndrome, but my first question to everyone is, are you an actual imposter, or are they making you feel like one?
Ah, yeah, of
course.
course.
When I went into the world of work, actually I walked in being like, listen, I've done my degree. I'm paying student loan. I did the interview. I deserve this role. I negotiated my pay, and I walked into work and they were like putting all these labels on me, or they were saying you're an imposter. And I started to believe them. And then one day, I was like, wait, hold on. But why are you saying that to me? Because I've actually been able to work hard for everything I've achieved. It's not lucky girl syndrome. It's not one day I manifested something and it happened. It's hard work, it's tenacity, it's overcoming failure and being resilient constantly. I think the second point I'd say is, you have imposter syndrome when I think you don't have enough self-awareness or ability in yourself to reflect on your skills. I'm using the skills that I have wonderfully been given and been supported.
No,
but these are the same skills that once upon a time someone said was too much, or too annoying, or too loud.
Much, yeah, too loud.
I'm a public speaker by trade. I have a radio show, I have a book, I do this wonderful stuff where I can use my voice, but not everyone's going to get it as long as you get it. I think otherwise, to come imposter syndrome, you have to surround yourself with a good circle. So you find your mentors, your allies, your advocates. You have to make sure that you understand you are what you consume. So if you're feeling terrible and you're going online and you're doom scrolling, or you're following terrible content, or you're not looking at the right hashtags, it's going to make you feel worse about yourself. Of course you are. Sometimes to overcome imposter syndrome, you just have to pause.
Yes,
right?
Of course.
I remember I had a moment where I was super into chicken wings and bubble tea. So I feel like an imposter, I feel terrible about myself. You know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to not do anything and go and have some chicken wings and bubble tea. And just think about actually everything I have achieved. I have a tracker where I keep all my good times as well as bad times, so I can see how I overcome it.
How you've overcome it, of course.
And I ask people questions like, what is the one thing you can depend on me for? Or what are some skills that you think are my superpowers? Or what do you think I really should be doing? And I think sometimes it's just about going in and getting advice. I mean, imposter syndrome, in summary, is a feeling, it's not a fact. It was a term that was created to put a label on high achieving women. And now over 70% of us feel like imposters. But again, I'd ask you, are you an imposter, or is it because the system's made you
I
feel
tell
like
you,
one?
of course, yeah. Thank you so much for such a powerful answer. I mean, you touched on being a radio presenter, and I know that some people say radio is outdated, but how would you challenge that, and especially the impact on minority communities?
Yeah, I think it's such a great question. So I was very fortunate that in 2021 I was approached by the BBC, and actually I am the host of the first and only business show on the BBC Asian network. Why is that important? It's important for representation, it's important to share stories, it's also important to make sure that we are spotlighting individuals who are doing great things for their community that maybe don't have the social media following, the clout or the PR behind them. I think outside of that, what it also means is that I don't necessarily have radio experience. I don't have the degree in radio. I didn't do radio before I went onto the BBC, but I knew that I eventually wanted to do radio. So I have a couple of TED Talks. I started using social media to really spotlight my voice. I was interviewing people, I was contributing where possible. So I did what one may say a lot of free labour to build up my skill set. But I don't believe it was free labour. I think it was skill building and skill swapping, and that's how I look at things. Yeah. So when the BBC came along, the funny story is that one, I didn't think I was going to get it, and two, I was actually applying for a PhD. So I was applying for a PhD in the background. So when the BBC came along to interview me, as in I actually had to do an interview like every other job to see if I was the right presenter or the best presenter, I had no idea that I was going to get it. So my head was going to be Dr. Sonia in like 3 years, not a radio presenter. And radio, is it outdated? I don't necessarily think it is. I think there's a mass market for individuals who are still going on the radio, listening to the radio, those who are in the cars, those who don't have access to podcasts. And I think radio in itself is live effort and authentic voices that are being able to kind of share different opinions and thought leadership that you wouldn't have beforehand. Podcasts, for example, are edited. You can say what you want and you can scroll it out. You know?
Yeah, of course.
Radio is still live and there's an energy behind it, and that's where it all started. Radio is basically conversations being had in which we can, where diversity can really be shown, because anyone and everyone can get into radio. So I got rejected from my PhD on a Friday at 12 p.m. and the BBC rang me at 3 p.m.
Ooh, well
so within 3 hours I went from being a doctor to being a presenter. And it was wild. And then in 2022, the show that I do, The Everyday Hustle, was named as the best radio station. It was awarded the best radio show in the country.
Wow, well done, Sonia.
Thank you, Asian Media Awards establishment. So I think it's just living proof that, the same people that said my voice was annoying when I was younger, I now got a radio show at the back of that.
Hey, that's why we think you're phenomenal.
Thank you.
Okay, Sonia, I know you've written a book, a best-selling book, Unprepared to Entrepreneur. Can you tell us a bit more about your book?
Yeah, I would love to. I mean, let me start by saying I didn't think I'd ever write a book. It was on my bucket list, but not this early. So it goes back to your question around imposter syndrome and confidence, and also diversity and inclusion. I started my business in 2020, not necessarily by choice, but by the
circumstance,
right?
Yeah, of course.
That I needed to do something to make sure that we all had food on the table and that my parents had a roof over their head. I'm the eldest child of 4. There's a lot of responsibilities that come with that in the South Asian culture. Not responsibilities that I don't want to take on, like I really do want to take them on. So at the start of 2020, when I started my business and I went online, especially on Google, no one's story really looked like me. Everybody came from wealth or money or networks, or were just like white middle class men. And I was like, this is great for you, but I'm not trying to be the next Elon Musk, because that's really not attainable right now. I'm trying to make sure that I get 30k a year, because that was my first grad salary and that's really what I was aiming for. And so I started doing a lot of research in the background, and I realized there's not much on social media at that time or and within books where you have diversity of stories and circumstances. And one book which gives you everything you need in terms of here's how to use LinkedIn, all the way to here's how to manage your money, here's what happens when your mindset isn't clear, all the way to, and here's someone who got it wrong and how you can overcome that challenge. And so that's really what I wrote. The funny-ish story is that the way that I got a book deal was that I presented my goal one day to write a book at a workshop that I was delivering on networking. And at the end of the session, one of the attendees said, listen, we really like the way you executed that, and based on the way that you executed it and the fact you shared your goal, we actually have a publisher that we'd like to put you in touch with for a conversation. It was just
wonderful.
a conversation, so I was like, yeah, cool.
Of course.
I kind of had my pitch ready because I knew what it was going to be. And I remember speaking to my commissioning editor, and she was like, listen, we're not looking for another feminist book. I was like, I get it, I'm on the LMF Network, but it's not about feminism, it's about startup. It's about the fact that I don't feel ready to be an entrepreneur, but I have to be, and I want to be. And so they said, we really like your pitch, go into a proposal. So I sat for the whole weekend writing this proposal down, and my closest loved ones would actually go through my proposal and give feedback, and they were like, this is not great, this is really not great, keep this, do this. And I did a lot of research. So when you do any proposal, it's like, why are you the best person to write the book? What are you bringing to the table? Who are your competitors? What already exists? How are you going to do the PR and marketing, all the way to how long is it going to get you, how long are you going to take to write the book? And so I sent it off, and I was like, this is what it's going to be. I know I can do it. I honestly didn't think they would say yes.
And what they did
and so when they said yes, and I signed the contract, and then I realised that I had 6 months to get this book sorted. I was like, what have I just signed up for? And going back to imposter syndrome, I felt like an absolute imposter. So I signed the dotted line around October, and the final edit was due in April. And October, November, I had brain fog and I froze up, and I was like, I'm naturally not a great writer. So what did I do? I went back to my skills. My skill, I can talk, I can communicate, I'm really good at spoken word. So I literally used to carry my phone around, go for walks and record myself and transcribe that into the book. So then all I was doing was changing the grammar and fixing the structures.
Well done, yes.
So by January, I'd basically taken myself offline for 2 weeks. I was only working on my book, and I redrafted it 7 times before it came out. So that's a lot of the process behind the scenes that people don't talk about and you don't know.
Yeah, of course.
And so when it came out, it was natural pushing, it was organic PR, it was advertising through social media, and it was just, getting people around you to be excited about it.
To be excited about the book,
and
of
then,
course.
When it came out in like Waterstones and W.H. Smith and foils,
well done,
do you know what I'd do? I'd go into the shop, I would remerch the book so it was in the front. I'd also try and sell it to people.
Yeah.
And I would, and they were like, do you work here? I'm like, technically no, but I personally know the author, and I think this would be a great book for you.
Oh, wow, you did that?
I've sold 5 of my own books to people in bookstores, pretending not to be the author because you wouldn't know otherwise, because I believe in it so much.
Yeah, of course.
Because I think you can't take it for granted. I learned how to be humble, but also how to be a hustler for my parents and for my family. And so you can't let go of that why and that purpose and that hustler mentality just because you might have a radio show or a book on Beyond sessions like this.
Yeah, of course.
Otherwise you'll lose your source.
Yeah, I'm so motivated, inspired by you, Sonia.
That's what you should do. You should just go, if bookstores are watching this, I definitely did do that. So.
Yeah, of course. So Sonia, I think my next question would be, you've achieved so much in the past 2 years.
Thank you.
Looking back now, what advice would you give your younger self, that little girl? What advice would you look back and give your younger self now?
Maybe I'd give 3 pieces of advice. One, I'd say you don't necessarily have to be a product of your circumstances. And what I mean by that was, I'm really blessed that my parents and my family worked really hard to make sure that we were aware that we could move up and level up, even if it was 1% daily.
Yeah.
Right? So I share the story about me being on a council estate or me not having so much money when I was growing up, because I want anyone who's watching this to think, just because you are in that environment doesn't mean that you have to stay in that environment. It's what you choose to do with it that helps you. And those taught me valuable life skills like being good to people and networking and building community and being true to yourself. That's really where it started. I think outside of that, what I would say is your superpower are your skills that probably show up and are spotlighted more than you would want them to be. So I'm naturally a great talker, but when I was younger, that was you're a chatterbox, or you're super loud, or you like to talk all the time, or why do you ask so many questions, or why do you interrupt people so much? Actually what it was I like to communicate, I'm super curious, And it was about how you finesse that confidence.
Of course.
Right? But when I went to the workspace, I didn't know that that was my superpower. So you and your gut know what your superpower is. You just have to be confident enough
Just
to actually
find
do
your superpowers,
something
yeah.
about it. And everyone has one. And I think the third thing was give everything a go. Every single thing that you can.
Would you say that? Really give everything a go? Because some people say, learn to say no.
See, I said before, I don't think a no is a no. It's not right now. I'm a big believer, and I've written this in my book, and I say it out loud, that if I think I can do 30% of something, I'm going to say yes to it. That's my number. My number is 30%.
So say yes.
Say yes to things that you can do 30% of, and give it a go at least once. Because at least after giving it a go, you can see if you like it, if you don't like it, what you've learned from it, if it's for you, if it's not for you, and then you can figure your way out to a different path. I'm a big believer of failing. I love to fail.
Yes, of course.
My God, and I'm so good at it. I'm so good at failing and breaking things. It's unreal. So now it's become like my superpower. I know the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fail at it. So I'm going to fail as fast as I can to get it out of my system, to learn from it, and then to move on. And one thing I remember my mom said, and I always quote her, she said, failure is nothing but a temporary disruptor.
Oh, wow.
And I was like...
Can you say that again?
Yeah. Like, failure is nothing but a temporary disruptor. And I was like, what a cool thing, firstly, for you to say. I was like, where was that in your pocket my whole life? And secondly, it's the fact that it's the same if you were going somewhere on Friday night with your friends and you were going out for dinner and the tube didn't work, or the Uber wasn't coming, or there wasn't a car available. You wouldn't stop yourself from going. You just find a different route or a different path. It'll take you a little bit longer, but you would get there in the end. I think that's what it is we're all trying to achieve or get somewhere. Your path is different to someone else's path. So don't compare yourself to those that you
anybody
see
else,
online or offline, what your friends are doing, what their families are doing. You don't know their circumstances. Focus on what you're doing, and if you have to take a longer route, which most of us do, think about what you're learning along the way and what you like. Like, if I didn't delete my social media, if I didn't work in tech, if I wasn't in a position where I didn't love my job, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now.
Yeah, of course.
You know, if someone told me when I was younger you could just be a radio presenter or an author, who knew if I would have taken all the other steps and learned so much along the way that I can now empathize with people and I can build that community and I can give back. So
of course.
Those are probably my three things. Is just because you are raised in a certain way, you've grown up in a certain circumstance, doesn't mean that you can't push yourself out. Someone has to, and then it's who you take along the way.
Of course.
That's really important.
That's really important.
The second is you have a superpower, everyone does. Do not let anybody tell you don't. You just have to find it. And the third is try everything as long as it fits in with your values, your purpose. And for me, the number is my 30%.
Yeah, of
I'm
course.
like, if I can do 30% of something, that's great.
That's great.
Something else that I talk about, especially in my book, are my 5 hashtags. So I'm like, as long as it fits into my 5 hashtags, I'm going to go and give it a go. And what that helps you do is it helps to give your focus, it helps to keep your passions and your purpose alive, but also it allows you to kind of finesse this world that's around you. And really, I'm a big energy believer, so I'm like, if I'm putting this out in terms of energy, then you know what? Things will come to me. The universe is listening. You just have to know what to ask it.
Yeah, certainly. I think you touched on it already. I wanted to touch on failure. And, you know, can you think back on a time where you faced a challenge or maybe feel like you failed? How did you pick yourself up, bounce back, and overcome challenges or even failure? Just one specific example.
Did you know that you could fail probation at work? I failed probation at work.
Oh, wow.
I failed 2 job roles. I failed my own health. So I think the point is that failure, you will always be failing, but when companies fail, they call it innovation and upgrades. And when you fail, you call it a mistake. And I think for me, it's about failure just basically means that you give something a go, and maybe the measure of success wasn't defined or it wasn't aligned and you took it back. I think one of my biggest failures in life was going into the workspace and failing probation. I didn't know that people failed probation. No one told me. I did a business degree. No one said when you get into business,
when you get into work, you fail probation.
I remember walking into my probation meeting and thinking I'd smashed it, thinking I was there for 3 months, thinking I'd like done the work they asked me to do, and it was absolutely aligned. And they were like, "Listen, you failed probation. We don't know what to do now." And I walked out of that room thinking, "What the hell's just happened?
What do I do now?"
So I ran to the bathrooms, and you could do 2 things at that point, right? You could either leave, or you could go back and you could say, look, okay, do you know what we can do? And I did this. I said, what was it that I failed? What were the kind of requirements that I didn't meet? Give me 3 months, give me 3 tasks, and let me go and prove yourself wrong, but also myself wrong. Let me go and prove myself right, and let me go and prove your kind of analysis and your what's the word? Kind of your confirmational validation. I don't even know what the word is. Let me go and prove. Let me go and prove myself right, and let me go and prove the fact that I deserve to be in this workspace through a defined metric, through goals, through working together, through having a clear task. And then not only did I pass it after 3 months, but I was there for 2.5 years.
Oh wow!
So I think that was one of my biggest failures was, if you have failed, which most of us have, don't give up. Just go and ask for advice. Tell them, or whoever it is, what criteria you didn't meet. You reflect on, actually, did you do the right work? Did you do what was asked of you? If not, what can you do different? Define the measure of success and give yourself a time period to do it. And even if you don't hit that end goal, think about all the brilliant milestones that you've hit along the way.
Yeah, brilliant.
And just be proud of that.
Wow, what a phenomenal
Anyone
woman.
watching this, like, we didn't know we could fail probation.
Or anyone watching this, what a phenomenal woman. I think my last question really is, are you working on any exciting projects right now that we should know about or be on the lookout for?
Absolutely. So I've recently just started a YouTube channel. I've come out of comfort zone. It took me 6 months to do it, but big up to my siblings who were like, there's no more ways that you can embarrass us, you might as well start YouTube. And I was like, perfect. So I started it, it's doing really well. So I've got a couple of shows coming out on there, actually a talk show called Tea with Sonia, as well as the LMF podcast, and some great behind the scenes content, including this, which will be behind the scenes vlog, as well as some travel vlogs. Outside of that, I'm working with a few companies and retail companies to interview them for their early careers talent, as well as making sure that we can debunk the career. Sorry, I've also got a cold, so I appreciate
Yes.
Outside of that, I'm working with a couple of retail firms and financial institutes to debunk myths in the career journey. So what that will mean is we're interviewing different stakeholders to make sure that we can amplify their voices and their career journeys for young professionals. And alongside that, honestly, I'm just trying to show up as the most authentic and best version of myself as I can in any project.
Yeah, of course.
So this year is all about media presenting, doing more on the radio, starting my own talk show series, because so far no one's given it to me, so I might as well just start it myself. Starting a YouTube channel, and actually just becoming and being what I believe is your biggest cheerleader. So yeah, definitely look at, there's a lot coming up. I actually can't say a lot of brand names because of NDA purposes.
Of course.
But I think if you just stay on socials and channels, that's great. I've just remembered actually, I've also just finished my second book proposal.
So when's
God
that
willing,
coming out?
When a publishing house gives me a book deal. So God willing, that will be this year too. So let's look out and see if that works, because currently as we speak, my agent is out there talking to publishers. So let's see if that works, or if there's a big failure, who knows, but we've given it a go at least.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you so much, Sonia, for sharing so much gem. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for your advice to all our listeners. I just want to say you're absolutely phenomenal. I know you personally. Keep doing what you're doing, and like what Sonia said, it's important to show up as your authentic self always. Thank you, Sonia.